Growing up on the south side of Chicago and back in the yards was very rough. But I have to admit, my friends and I would often make decisions, impetuous and risk-taking decisions that would make it even more difficult. For example, in the summer of 1987, at age 11, my friends and I decided we're gonna go on a little adventure. On this day, we decided that we're gonna go and retrieve a gun from beneath the porch of a friend's house. And days before, we had just joined the gang. And as if that wasn't adventurous enough, when I arrived there at the back porch of my friend's house, I remember reaching beneath the porch, pulling out a black bag, looking inside and seeing a big, giant, frightening-looking weapon. Too scary for us to pick up. But lying next to it was a .22 Smith & Wesson long. It looked like a Yosemite Sam gun. It's the first thing I said, Yosemite Sam. My friends laughed because I picked it up and I began to twirl it about. Though nervous, I was trying to impress my friends. My other friend grabbed it and did the same. We were joking. Within a moment, suddenly the gun went off. Boom. The bullet hit me in my face and knocked my head against the garage door. I remember in that moment coming in and out of slow motion and darkness. I remember feeling a very sharp, piercing sensation shooting through my face. And I remember I couldn't see out of my left eye. And I heard a loud bzzz. The bullet entered beneath my left eye. If you see a dimple, it's not a dimple. The bullet hit and it shattered the bone and sent fragments in every direction. It lodged behind my left ear and it damaged my retina. I remember my friend who had shot me dropping the gun and grabbing me instantly. My other friends doing the same, saying you're gonna be okay. The little consciousness that I remembered and what I appreciated most is they never left my side. I remember them walking me to my other friend's house, Pito's house. When we got there, his mother was horrified. She said, "Oh my God." And she said, "Pinche gangueros," because she knew that we were already involved in gangs. I just thought for certain I was gonna die. When the ambulance arrived, I remember them putting me on a gurney at a slight slant. And they kept saying, "Don't lay him all the way down because I'm choking on his blood." Interesting, by that time, I was already swallowing my blood. I thought for some reason that by swallowing my own blood, it would stop me from bleeding to death. I'll never forget the technician standing above me with a big giant needle, and I looked up and I said, "Are you gonna give me a shot?" He said, "No worries, Xavier, I already gave you a shot." Apparently at that point, it damaged my nerves so badly that I had lost all sensation on the left side of my face. And it's funny, I had just been shot in my face and I was afraid of a needle. You know? I was shot in my face, but I was afraid of a needle. I remember being in the ambulance and the officer stepping in saying, "Who shot you?" And I remember looking up and looking at him. I said nothing at first. He said, "Who shot you?" And all my life I've been raised and told, you don't tell on people, especially not your friends. And without a moment of thought and much time to consider, I just made up a story. I said, "A man in a black car." I just made up a story. I remember arriving at the hospital, and while this was happening, my friends were being interrogated back at the police station. But amid all of the chaos, we didn't have a chance to come up with a story. We didn't have a script. And one of my friends, he told the truth. He just figured it was an accident. My friend shot my other friend by accident. He didn't think anyone would get into trouble, but he was wrong. The police ended up locking up my best friend for my attempted murder, along with another friend. I remember getting out the hospital, my mother coming to get me. In complete embarrassment, my mother, God bless her soul, she arrived eager to bring me home, but didn't bring any clothes. And I remember that ride home on the CTA bus, heading home with blood-crusted clothing, looking like a monster to people around me. I remember how quickly I ran to the streets. Because despite the dangerousness of having almost lost my life, the gang was the only real love that I had felt at that point. And while walking through my neighborhood in this vulnerable state, the police officers drove up and they said, "What's up, Speedy?" And I just stopped because I knew the routine. They're gonna jump out the car, shake me down, and send me on my way. But instead on this day, they said, "Hop in the back seat of the car, Speedy. Hop in the back seat." So I went in the back seat of the car, and I remember sitting there, and I said, what's going on? Why are you arresting me? What's happening? He said, you're getting locked up, Speedy. I was like, for what? He said, for obstruction of justice. I was like, obstruction of justice? I'm 11 years old. Of course, I didn't know what he meant when he said obstruction of justice. While in the police station, they told me, Xavier, you're going to go to detention. I was like, detention? And I had never been there before. I remember arriving there at intake, and there the nurse assessing my wounds, seeing if I can bear with what I was going to go through, whether I should be locked away and kept from the other kids or placed on a normal section. And for me, never being able to be vulnerable and express what I was going through, I often would say, I'm okay, I'm all right, I'm fine. And I convinced the nurse that I can go in the section with the other kids. So the following day, I found myself on section. And while sitting there in the best seat in the TV room across from the television with the remote and changing it as I pleased, and without moment's notice, a kid who had came in from school walked up to me and said, get up out that seat, bro. And I looked up to him and I said, what? And he said, get up out that seat, you're in my seat. He saw that I was physically vulnerable. And I remember one of the older gang members that told me, he said, if anyone ever tries to disrespect you or tries to take something from you in prison, don't say nothing, just swing. And I remember jumping up and swinging with all my might, and I remember hitting him. And I remember opening my eyes, and he was still there. It was no win. The kid was bigger than me, and he beat me into the television. They broke us up and separated us with single swipes, grabbed me and threw me to solitary confinement at the back of the section. Me and him, cell next to cell. I was in there breathing hard. I was looking in this dingy mirror, trying to assess my scars to see if they got worse. Discovered I had a busted mouth along with all the other physical trauma. But I will never forget the feeling when I was told that I was not going to be leaving that cell anytime soon. I'll never forget the inability to really wrap my mind around them telling me I was in solitary confinement and that at the very young age of 11 years old, I would not be able to have human contact. And for an 11-year-old child to be in that place, physically vulnerable already, emotionally torn, and understand for me, not understanding what my charges were. In my mind, I'm locked up for my own shooting. Understand that. And after days there, I finally was able to show up before a judge. And when he looked at us, he didn't see children. He didn't see us as kids. He gave us a year of probation and sent us along our way. There was no talk of trauma of me being a gunshot victim. No talk of the trauma of my friends witnessing it. Back in the 80s, there was no talk about adverse childhood experiences. And so for them, when they saw us, they saw criminals, miniature adults, having experienced it. I had no trust for the system. And again, I ran back to my gang. By the time I was 13 years old, I had 19 arrests and 7 convictions for armed robberies, aggravated assaults, weapon charges. For things I look back now to as an adult, and it's hard for me to wrap my mind around those things. How can a child be involved in that? My final charge at the age of 13 was for the loss of another child's life in my community. And his name was Pedro Martinez. Although I did not physically kill Pedro, I was the one that was on security across the street with a weapon in my pocket looking towards 50th and Loomis. And I saw him turn the corner. I remember alerting my gang because we had just been shot at earlier that day. In fact, it was a normal occurrence. And what I thought would be a threat was really a 14-year-old child. And on that day, he was lured into an abandoned building where he was killed. He didn't deserve to die. I remember running home that night, crying and asking God to forgive me. I remember laying on the couch and I couldn't sleep and I just kept praying, God, please forgive me. But no matter how much I prayed, I couldn't forgive myself. Days later, I was arrested and charged with murder. The police came first to arrest me because my brother had told them about weapons I had hidden in my mother's home. And when they came, they arrested me and they grabbed the weapons and they said, "You're not gonna get out for a very long time." And I knew that. But they knew something else that I didn't know, and that is that I was wanted for murder. On Monday morning, I stepped into the courtroom and they said, "Xavier, you're released." I said, "Released?" They said, "Yeah, you're released to homicide." I was like, "Homicide?" And I looked behind me and it was two detectives with cuffs waiting to apprehend me. And they walked up and gently put the cuffs on my back and they walked me out of that courtroom. I arrived at the homicide unit there. And while in that police station, I remember the officers first very nicely asking me, "Do you remember where you were at on October 28th? The night of October 28th? Do you remember where you were at?" I said, "No, I don't remember. I have no idea." And another officer came running with a telephone book and he struck me in my face. For almost an hour and a half, they were choking me, hitting me with a telephone book, threatening me, and they convinced me that it was over. And when I tried, even as a 13-year-old child, to tell my simple truth, my role in it, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough that I was outside the building when it happened. They wanted me to place myself inside that building. And when they beat me into that confession, I remember arriving there at the Audi home, and while there, being placed in solitary confinement again, because I couldn't be along with the other kids, I remember being in that space and telling myself my life's over. I went to the adult criminal court, and there they gave me a 25-year sentence. And that was a call of mercy on the behalf of my judge. Literally, because my public defender fought for me. I ended up serving 13 years in prison, and while there, I changed my life. And since then, I have lived out my eternal apology to Pedro. I lived out my eternal apology to his family, my family, and those I had harmed in the community growing up. I ended up earning an Associate of Arts, an Associate's in General Education, a Bachelor's degree in Social Science, had a 4.0 GPA, was inducted into the Franklin Honor Society for Outstanding Scholarship, all while behind bars. And I came out at age 26 with a remorseful heart and a mission and desire to make a difference in my community, to fight for marginalized, disregarded, and forgotten children who were just like me. And I've done that work for the past 20 years now. I've been out for 20 years, y'all. And today I'm 46 and I'm able to stand here now as a father, and also a co-executive director at the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. And I advocate on behalf of kids who are given extreme sentences because of the same outmoded, uncaring thinking about children that was imposed upon me. And I often think back upon my life and I ask myself, what could have made a difference in my life? What could have really made a difference? I was not really a bad child. No child's born bad. And I always remind myself very gently that, Xavier, it's only because they didn't see you as a child. They never saw you as a child, let alone as a victim. And I'm convinced in this work as an advocate for kids who have been discarded by society that sadly, we have not gone very far from that way of treatment of kids since the time of the 80s and 90s when they were calling us super predators. According to a study conducted by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, more than 90% of kids in the justice system have experienced 2 or more ACEs, that is, adverse childhood experiences. And our only response to those traumas, or the manifestation of those traumas, have been to lock them in shackles, place them in handcuffs, put them in solitary confinement, and sentence them to life without the possibility of parole. There are people in this room right now who went through that shit. And I feel you. And this is our truth. Denying the rights of children, the human rights of children, is a hallmark of the American criminal justice system. And it is extremely disproportionate and brutal in this treatment of Black children. We are the only country in the world that sentences children to life without the possibility of parole. And that sentence is mostly reserved for who? Black children who have experienced the most severe exposures to trauma. But I'm proud to say that there are many in this room and many across this country who, despite the imposition of extreme sentences, and thankfully to the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court and recognizing the neuroscience and recognizing the impacts of trauma and the staunch advocacy of people who refuse to settle for less for America's children, more than 800 people across this country have been released who are condemned to die in prison as children. You cannot stop the humanity that's within us. You cannot strip our soul. We are human beings. We're not inmates. We're not offenders. We're not cons nor ex-cons. We are fathers, photographers, artists, tech experts. We are people who have such great capacity to do amazing things if given a chance. And my only hope for this TED Talk, honestly, that people, if they ever see on the news and hear of a child having committed a serious violent offense, I only hope that this TED Talk will help people not ask the question, is that child a monster? But instead, to ask the question, who or what could have possibly failed this child so badly that he may have never had a chance in the first place? Thank you. Thank you.